There are over 75 million monthly Tubi viewers. That's more people than there are influencers on the internet, which means Tubi is more popular than sponsored posts for digestive enzymes and high coverage foundation. More popular than soft launching your boyfriend. More popular than making boomers explode with rage when you tell them how much you make on a single post. Tubi, it's more popular than influencers. See you in there.
These days, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries, and with that, we sent away good jobs and our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make all kinds of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs in towns and cities across the country. And jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It is time to turn our attention to international football. And so this is the first of our episodes, which are going to be previewing the European Championships this summer in Germany, Euro 2024. So we're going to be doing 3 shows in this series. We're going to take a look at 2 individual groups in each of them. So we're going to start today with groups A and B. Tomorrow, we'll drop an episode including groups C and D. And then on Friday, we'll do groups E and F. So it was going to run over. They was going to be uber long episodes if we didn't break it down. So we hope that each of them provides you with enough detail on the 4 teams to keep you intrigued. If you listen to this later on, please do go and check out the other episodes as well. My name's Jack Collins. I'll be your host today. And joining me as ever, my co-host, my friend, Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
It's coming home. It's coming home. Here he goes. Here he is. You looking forward to this, mate?
Oh, yeah. I was tempted to take England and just be like, I'll talk about England. You deal with the rest of it just for this. But mate, I'm excited. Look, I love international football. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. And I mean, everyone comes to this point. They're like, wow, it's a tournament. Let's get involved. But I love international football kind of around the clock. I love international breaks. I know I'm in the minority. I appreciate it. I love the Nations League. I love the Euros. I love the qualifiers. I love all of it. I think it's great. And so this is very much up my Strasse. To quote
I mean, this is different. You know, Euros and World Cups and Copa America, they're a bit different, aren't they? Because they are... Well, this one in particular is a packed schedule. I mean, you're getting a lot of football here. I've seen a few memes on TikTok of, the partners of football lovers thinking they're about to get a break from the football, not knowing what is around the corner, the most intense football schedule they've possibly ever seen. Because people like you, I mean, poor Lucy, and luckily she likes football a bit, mate, because you're going to probably be double-ending this schedule by watching all the Euros and trying to get in the Copa America, which is going to be tough, but I'm sure you'll manage it somehow.
Find a way. We always find a way.
But yeah, even if you're just doing the Euros alone, lot of games in here, a lot of games to get through.
Seems like a good time to tell everyone that I'm going to the Euros for a week. So I'm going out on the first Saturday, the day after the Germany-Scotland opener, and then staying around Duisburg and sort of travelling between different games. I think there's some in Mönchengladbach, there's some in Cologne. We'll be travelling around, I think, get to Dortmund as well. So all very exciting in terms of what we've got going on. And our first tournament on the ground, really. So I'll be able to give a bit of a flavour throughout this tournament. We're going to be doing loads of podcasts, obviously on here, but also on the Patreon, working through the complex amount of football that there is to work through. But some of it's going to be from on the ground in Germany as well. And then obviously in the second half of the Copa America, you're going to be on the ground in San Diego. So
I will be.
There's lots of things for us to get through. I'm really, really excited.
It's a big summer. It's a very big summer for football and for Ranks FC. So make sure you stick with us here and on Patreon, where we'll be doing loads of extra stuff too. So get yourselves over there. If you haven't had a free trial, you can still get one. If you have, then it's
Dean's-
only a fiver, then come over.
Dean's transfer show is back for the summer. Second one released on Monday. We're talking about lots of things, including Benjamin Šeško and potentially Brian and Burmo looking at a big move. Loads of different things to get stuck into. So they'll be dropping throughout the summer over on the Patreon as well. So please do come and get involved. It's a great time. It's a great time. But we should get stuck into this, DJ. And we have lots to cover. So we're going to start in Group A. And you are going to start us off with the hosts, Germany.
Yeah, I am, yeah. Look, one thing first of all about Germany is they host good tournaments. World Cup 2006 was brilliant. And so I'm very optimistic about what is in store for you, for your week out there. But also on a wider scheme of things, having a normal tournament. Because, the World Cup, Qatar, wasn't really normal, was it? And then the last Euros obviously ended up being held in England during COVID restrictions and just wasn't normal at all. A tournament that's supposed to be shared around. It became very strange. But now we have a normal tournament held in one country, which has good footballing traditions, good stadia. It's going to have amazing atmosphere, and it's going to have a hell of a lot of fans flocking into the country. Now, it's all great, apart from for the fact Germany are under quite a bit of pressure because for the last few tournaments, they have not been very good. So they've got to overcome the odds, really, and prove that they are actually better than most people will be expecting. Now, on paper, their team is actually all right. I
think that's doing it a bit of an underservice.
No, I say all right, mate, because I think half of it is undermines the rest of it. I think the top end of this team is actually top end. So when you're looking at the attack and you're like, okay, Musiala, Havertz, Wirtz, probably Gundogan playing behind him if last night was anything to go by. That's tasty, right? I like Gundogan as well because he's got that experience. I think that there's something about him. I mean, he should have scored in that game. He didn't make the most of his chance, but players like that, I think, are even crucial to have around the most important younger members of the strike force. And then you've obviously got Kimmich and you've got Neuer, Rudiger, you've got Kroos. But there are players in there like Andrić and Pascal Gross. If they end up having to play, massively bring down the levels of that squad and what it's capable.
That's so unfair on Robert Andrić, who has been an absolutely key cog in Leverkusen's double-winning, unbeaten campaign.
There's a massive difference here between doing it for unexpected Leverkusen and got to step our game up Germany hosting a tournament and up against it.
Maybe. I think there's a difference here in that we'd done this preview 6 months ago, right? And we talked about it. We did do an early kind of favourites back in November. And the idea of putting Germany up amongst it, I think you said to them, you can't write off the Germans on home soil, but it felt like a gamble to suggest that they would have sorted things out by the time the summer came around. And you go to back to September 2023, and they'd lost 4 out of 5 games. They'd won 0 of those games. They were pretty average, you'd imagine, on an international scale opponents. Nagelsmann took over. They lost 3-2 to Turkey and then got beaten 2-0 by Austria. Kai Havertz played sort of left back in that game. Yeah. There was all sorts of uproar and furore. And Nagelsmann came out and was like, I don't know why we're thinking of ourselves as favourites. We have been dreadful for the last 5-6 years. We keep getting knocked out of tournaments in the group stages or early on. Why do we have this complex that we are suddenly brilliant? And to be honest, I didn't think it was a great vibe because I was like, hang on, mate, you're hosting a tournament. You are one of the international powerhouses of the footballing world. You need to look at this as an opportunity to go and go deep into the conversation, if not win it. But since then, it's really quickly how things have kind of flipped, right? Because they had that big 2-0 win over France where they went back to playing with a back four. Havertz stopped playing left back and went up top and was very, very good. And then they won 2-1 against their great rivals, the Netherlands, from behind. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's mad how quickly the script has flipped. And part of that is obviously Toni Kroos coming out of international retirement and be like, nah, go on then, I'll give it one more go. And I feel like the mood around the camp has completely flipped.
Yeah, well, I've got Kroos Kroos impacts written down here. I've gone very old school today, by the way, with my notes. I've got like proper notes written down on paper, which I haven't done for a long time.
First
but I like
time
it.
for everything, yeah.
No, this is how I used to do it in my newspaper days when I'd have to do my big tournament previews, and I'd jot it all down and then transfer it to typed. But yeah, just reading it out my notes today. But I think, look, the top end, the interplay and attack will be lovely. Okay, it will be some of the most delicious football we might see at this tournament will come from the interplays in and around the box. But I'm not confident enough of them taking the chances. And I also am concerned for them that if they don't make the most of their periods of dominance, that they start to fade and are then caught out going the other way, which, I mean, I only watched I watched the entirety of the first half when they played against Ukraine last night, and it kind of felt like that with it. They should have been a couple of goals ahead quite early, considering the kind of openings that they were getting. It looked quite good. But then that faded, and it's obviously quite normal for that to happen, particularly in an international friendly, so I don't want to judge it too heavily on it. But I'm concerned about them going backwards because I think that the fullbacks can be exposed. And I think that you can score goals against them. I think if you look at Germany typically, like there's mostly small margins involved in their games that decide them. And I think the other thing that's probably slightly strange going into this tournament is that you would usually have a hardcore of Bayern players that have just come off a winning season and are probably padded out by a few Dortmund players doing similarly. And that's not there. And that combined with Nagelsmann, who's obviously inexperienced in terms of tournament management, it just raises an unknown factor for me as to where, like, German football is in a very different place as they come into this tournament compared to where they would have been hosting tournaments in the past. So, look, I have to give them a chance of doing well in this tournament because it's Germany and they're on home soil. And when you look at their record in the Euros recently, you know, apart from the last one, which was last 16, you're going semi-final, finalists. Like, this is a team that has big tournament football ingrained in them. But beyond the group stages, I don't know what we'll be getting. I think they'll be fine in the groups.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because there's this kind of element, and I take your point on Bayern, but part of me is like, well, who've been the best team in Germany? Do you build around that? And that's why I kind of kick back against your Robert Andrich point. Because Jonathan Tah, Robert Andrich, Florian Wirtz, it's quite an interesting Leverkusen spine that runs through that team. And then on the other side of that, you've got Neuer in goal, and whether Neuer should be starting or not is probably a question that we could raise, but he's going to. So I think that's going to be where it's at. Antonio Rudiger, who has kind of quietly emerged, and we talked about this on our kind of Champions League final review, as maybe the best centre back, or at least in the category of the best centre backs in Europe across the course of this season. Toni Kroos, who was just man of the match by my money in the Champions League final, and Kai Havertz, who's had an incredible season with Arsenal. And you kind of look at that and you think, well, there's the experience there. There's a bit of flair and fun in Musiala and Wirtz and the players that are going to kick off that. It looks good from where I'm seeing. And I think they have this explosivity factor. And look, I've been banging on about Maximilian Bayer for a while now because I think he's exceptional. But I think that whilst Füllkrug and Havertz will share the kind of forward role, if one of those is going to start, I think, in every game, I think Bayer offers something really, really different. And I think that ability to get in behind and, his cameo against Ukraine, which I thought was excellent, first touches in international football, smashes one against the bar, gets a shot off, really good save. And you're like, oh, that's a good place to start. I think that Germany have the explosivity that they've perhaps been lacking for a couple of years, combined with a really, really strong spine.
Yeah, no, they've got explosivity. I'm just concerned about the goal scorer. Like, Havertz can work well in this team. Yeah, Füllkrug, potentially. I don't know. I mean, I had some faith in him in scoring in that Champions League final. He did, but he was offside. And actually, he's felt a bit of venom actually in the aftermath of that final, which is harsh, but that's what it is.
Which I think is incredibly harsh, considering that I actually thought he came out of the final with his stock raised. I thought he played very, very well.
Yeah. And so I think that perhaps inexperience would be how I would point to some of these players that they're going to come to rely on. I mean, when you consider the international experience of someone like Andrić, literally a handful of caps at this stage as he heads into the tournament, right? And I'm not saying that like that has to be a problem, but most of the time when you're looking at other countries that you would expect to contend with Germany for honours, the ones that have a handful of caps are usually 18, 19, 20 years old. Andrić is like 29. And so on one hand, you'd be like, okay, well, he's got experience though. It's like, yeah, but to get to this stage, I feel like you need a bit more behind you if you're going to have a pivotal role. Look, this is obviously personal feelings. Like I could be proved to be wrong here. But the flip of that is that you have got players like Tar, who is a similar age, I think, actually, isn't he? But I've got more faith in him, actually, to actually come through this tournament and do well. And then obviously Florian Wirtz is 21 and could be the player of the tournament. So I'm all over the place when it comes to Germany generally. And I don't perhaps have faith in them once we get to the knockouts. But in terms of the opening stages of this tournament, they've got an opportunity to show what they're about. If they can... Look, the first game was obviously against Scotland on Friday, June the 14th. It's a game they have to win. It won't be easy because of the way that Scotland go about things. Scotland, remember when they upset Spain and the type of tactics that they used to rattle
Rodri
them?
More than anyone.
They upset Rodri the most. But that's probably what we'll be getting from Scotland. So they're going to go and try and upset and rattle the hosts. And say Germany didn't win that game. Say Scotland managed to get a draw. And then the second game, Germany v Hungary, extremely difficult match. It's all looking very tight. And yeah, I don't have the confidence in them personally to go all the way in this tournament. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They do get out of the group.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go with that. I'm going to put my neck on the line and say that I think Germany are favourites, my favourites for this tournament.
Wow.
I have
That's
so
madness.
much faith in this side. I think they probably
Favourites
have
for the tournament.
I think they have the best manager at the tournament. And
What?
I think that they have the squad to back it up.
Mate, I don't know. Do you know we're talking about Germany, not France?
I think that Julian Nagelsmann, pound for pound,
He's
is
the
best
best
coach of the
tournament manager here.
No, not the best tournament manager. I think he's the best manager at the tournament.
Okay.
If you were going to employ one manager from this tournament for your side, for your team, it would be Julian Nagelsmann.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb.
It's a hot take.
It's a hot take. I think Germany have what it takes to go all the way here. And you know what my record's like at predicting tournaments. I'm actually quite good at this.
You are
I'm not
quite
very good
at it,
at week by weeks, but
No,
my Italy and Argentina
All right.
shouts came through before
Well,
the
we
last
better
two. So let's see. if
Cut
it's
this
their
bit
time
out, mate,
lucky.
and stick it on video.
Maybe we will. Maybe we will. All right, you mentioned Scotland. I think it's probably time to come on to them. I've done my preview slightly differently to you in that I've done some thoughts on each of these and then a key player and a one to watch. So I'm going to do these slightly in a different manner. But my thoughts on Scotland are as follows. Basically, do they have the attacking juice to actually score goals? I watched them against Gibraltar on Monday night, where they were functional rather than flashy, as Ewan Murray so poetically put it in The Guardian. And it really did little to convince me that there's enough cutting edge in this Scotland attack to really hurt teams. There's a lack of elite options through the middle. Lawrence Shankland was the top scorer in the Scottish Premier League for Hearts, but has yet to really do it on an international stage. Scored a really impressive header against Georgia in the qualification, a really important header. But again, I think that if you're relying on Lawrence Shankland, and he's not the most mobile of strikers, we should probably point out here, then I think you're going to struggle up top. Che Adams, Ryan Christie, kind of less forwards these days and playing slightly different roles in different players. The midfield core is strong though, and I think that should stand Scotland in good stead. Like Billy Gilmore's really come into his own for Brighton this season. Callum McGregor is Celtic captain, and I imagine he will sit in the middle and steady the ship. Christie has excelled for Bournemouth in a deeper role, and there's also Sam Tighe's favourite player, Kenny McLean, still kicking around as well. I know Sam has a huge soft spot for Kenny McLean, thinks he's one of the most underrated players on the planet. So it's good to get him in there as well. He will be travelling. But it takes us on quite nicely to both of these, key player and one to watch. I think the key player is John McGinn. He's the engine room of this side. And I think that energy and dynamism and what he's brought to the table for Villa this year in the Premier League, if he can do that, he's going to cause problems for all sorts of teams. And he's kind of released in a more free role by Steve Clarke. And I think that you can kind of say that for both, because my one to watch is Scott McTominay, not because I think he's going to suddenly explode out of this tournament, but because I think that there is an element here where he is allowed to do things for Scotland that he's rarely been allowed to do for Manchester United. But when he has, he's been very useful at it. These are the points where Scott McTominay is very all action for Scotland. There are points where he's clearing the ball off his own line. There are other points where he's scoring all of the goals that fire them to these Euros and beyond. And I think that, when you're looking at him, at one point he was top scorer in Euro qualification. And it's just sort of, what player are we watching here? Because this is not the same person that we've necessarily noticed for United for all these years. But saying that, these moments where he has been unleashed as a kind of box threat, someone allowed to crash the box from deep to try and get on the end of things, he has proved that he has that ability to score important goals and make things happen. And I don't think there's been anywhere he's proved that more than on the international stage for Scotland. And these two together provide this kind of dynamic but also threatening presence from midfield. And they're allowed to do so because of the way that Clarke sets them up. I'm not sure who's going to play behind them. We've just mentioned, all of those different players. I'd imagine it'll be McGregor and Gilmour, but they have lots of different options in order to make that work. Instead, you're kind of now looking at this and being like, well, does that free McTominay and McGinn to get into those positions where they can cause problems? And if there isn't a striker capable of scoring goals, if they're going to use Che Adams to run the channels, to try and stretch defences, does that open up the gaps for these two to exploit? Now, we know that they have strength from that left centre-back position, in that Andy Robertson will go down the flank and overlap, and Kieran Tierney will carry the ball out from deep and do different things. The question then becomes, who is the person who's going to get the ball in the middle and make things happen? And I think if the Scots are going to progress out of this group, and I think it's very difficult, and I think it's a very, very tricky group for them. At the time, when it was drawn, I think a lot of people were like, oh, Scotland might progress from that. I make them fourth favourites in this group, not because I think that they're a bad side, but because I think that they're probably not as well drilled as the Swiss. And I've got a real soft spot for this Hungary team, which we'll come on to in a minute. But if they are going to get out of it, I think it's these two that make the difference. And that, as much as I'd love to be talking about Ben Doak here, I'm not still 100% sure he's going to be even on the plane at this point. They're a 29-man, 30-man squad at this moment. He might be one that ends up, but this will be the last tournament where Ben Doak is not an absolute shoe-in mainstay for the Scotland squad.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think, what are the strengths of Scotland? I think that unity and togetherness is going to be big. Like, the spirit of this team will have them ready for that first match against Germany and giving them the chance of matching the kind of emotions that will be around the players, given that Germany are hosting the tournament. And I think Scotland will actually be able to deal with that. What are their other strengths in terms of the actual setup? I mean, Steve Clarke's worked wonders for this team. He's transformed them 100%. Like, I'm not sure. I've never been sure what I really make of Steve Clarke as a man and as a manager, but undeniably the job he's done here has been brilliant. And then you look on the pitch, McGinn, Andy Robertson, Scott McTominay, kind of your core, isn't it? And I mean, that's quite a big reliability on those three to be enough to get out of a group that is this advanced when it comes to tournament football.
It's competitive, I think.
Yeah, possibly. But I'll talk about Switzerland next. And for all the doubts I have around Switzerland, the thing they do have is tournament nous, and I think that counts for a lot, and possibly Scotland don't have it.
Well, it seems like a nice time and an easy segue to move on to the Swiss. So let's discuss them. I'm going to put it out there beforehand, and I don't mean this with any disrespect. Switzerland might be my least favourite international side, because I once travelled to Geneva to watch Switzerland beat Ireland 2-0, and it was maybe the worst footballing experience I've ever had in terms of being in the stadium. Not because it had a great trip, brilliant trip with the boys, but like the actual game. I think Switzerland scored within 2 minutes. Seamus Coleman got sent off. The only highlight was Darren Randolph saving a penalty. And then Switzerland scored again. And I was left completely bereft by this point. It was like, well, they're just not even good and they've beaten us so comfortably. It really did. It was tough.
Yeah. Look, this is a team that I, again, don't hold high hopes for. They've got quite an aging team. Their qualifying campaign was underwhelming, and there's a real lack of star quality. I think there's also not enough zip and reliability in the attack to know that they're going to score enough goals to actually do anything to get out the group, let alone do anything in the knockout stages of this tournament. I was looking to see who most Swiss experts would have expected to lead the attack, and a lot of them are going with Zeki Amdouni, who was at Burnley last season. Now, looking qualifying, he's got a decent record. He was their top scorer, got 6 goals. Good player. In Premier League terms, started 27 games, got 5 goals. He's a good player. And actually, when you're looking at the squad, you're thinking he's probably one of the ones you really are clinging on to be like a breakout, if you like, on this sort of stage. And the reason that is because they got so many players that are almost past it, you know? And I think that's going to be the big problem for this team. That generation of players, Xhaka, Shaqiri, Sommer, they've come through a time when Switzerland have obviously been considered to be a really tricky team, particularly in tournaments like this. But the time's probably gone for them to be a force. Now, obviously, you're going to probably throw back at me there if you listen to that Granit Xhaka's just had possibly the best season of his career.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, and Sommer's gone to Inter Milan and solved a massive problem for them. Absolutely. And this is
Gregor
the thing.
Kerbel's going to be on the bench.
Kerbel, yeah, that's true, yeah.
You know, I mean, depth there. It's annoying that you don't need 2 goalkeepers.
That's the best goalkeeping depth you can hope for, those 2. But the thing that works well for the boss, Yakin, is that when you read about what he wants, what he's expecting, when he's at his best, it's when his sides are not fancy. He doesn't want Switzerland to be considered favourites to get out this group. He wants everyone to be expecting nothing from them. He wants me to be sat here talking about the fact that they've been pretty underwhelming in qualifying. That suits him because he's got no pressure to come from that sense. And by all accounts, he's quite a relaxed character. And his relationships with the players in this team are very easygoing. He's very personable. Yeah. And he manages to get an extra level out of these players. So when I consider some of the tactics that they've tried in qualifying, when I look at their predicted starting 11, I'm certainly not blown away by any of it. But they've definitely got a better chance, I think, of getting out of this group than Scotland have, because they have got a level of intelligence that I think just leaves them above them.
Yeah, I think this is it. I kind of want to say that I think Scotland will finish above Switzerland. And then I look at this Swiss squad and you're kind of like, all right, Sommer in goal. And then a centre-back pairing of Fabian Schär and Manuel Akanji, very, very impressive in itself. You kind of go into the midfield and you're talking Granit Xhaka, you're talking Remo Freuler, who's had a really good campaign for Bologna, and Erbischer, who's been part of that as well. Not quite as regular as starter, but definitely someone who's contributed quite heavily to that Bologna campaign. You're kind of looking at that and going, yeah, and Fabian Rieder, I think, is a really good player at Rennes. So you're kind of looking at that, and then you go to the forwards, and look, Seferovic isn't there anymore. Maybe my least favourite player in the world ever. But he's not there anymore. Breel Mbolo, who's been pretty much the lifeblood of this Swiss attack, isn't going to start for the first few games because he's had a relapse on his injury recovery from an ACL. So you're kind of looking at the kind of attack and you think, well, this is an opportunity for, you mentioned Zeki Amdouni, but also I think Noah Okafor, who has an opportunity to really light this up. And Dan and Doy, who's become quite a fixture, I think, of this Swiss side, despite only being really within it for the best part of a year.
Yeah.
He's been excellent for Bologna as well. So there is a Bologna core here that I'm kind of looking at and going, they've all been very good. for their club. They've all gone and helped Bologna qualify for the Champions League. And so whilst I too am not wildly excited about this Swiss side, I think if you kind of compare that to where the levels are with Scotland, I'm kind of just sort of stuck on a point that I can't help but think that the experience and the spine of that will see them through when the going gets tough in a way that maybe Scotland's won't.
Yeah, I think that's fair, mate.
I really want to be positive about Scotland. I really do. I'm really struggling with this.
It's hard, mate.
But it's hard when you have this group because I got to say, this Hungary side, I think are my favourite side at Euro 2024. They are loads of fun. And they're in a really, really good spot. They've been really competitive in the last 2 European Championships, including last time out where they very, very nearly missed out on qualifications around the 16, even though they were in the group of death with Portugal, Germany and France. But they're now so much more comfortable in their own skin. And look, you remember, throw it back to Euro 2016 when they had a really interesting game with Portugal, 3-3, that was basically on the verge of knocking out the eventual winners in the group stages. But they were super reactive, Hungary, at that point. They were really, really counter-attacking. And they haven't lost that, but they are far more creative and in flux, I think, than they've ever been before. And they play a 5-3-2. Do not mistake that for any sort of negative tactics. They're creative, especially on the counter. And I think watching them in qualifying, they put together some of the most impressive free-flowing sequences of play of any team across the qualification campaign. Tom Mortimer has said in The Guardian, Hungary are on a run of 1 defeat in 18 games, which is not to be sniffed at, especially when you take into account away wins over Germany and England included in that sequence. And then you need to take their qualification campaign into account as well. Unbeaten across their 8 games, topping their group for the first time ever. They were excellent in the Nations League in 2022. They came second very narrowly to Italy in a group that had England and Germany in it. Hungary, dark horses, do not rule it out. I think this side are really, really impressive. And the spine's so strong. They've got veteran goalkeeper and centre-back in Peter Galassi and Willi Orban. That's the foundation that this team is built on. Their wing-backs have license to get forward, and I'll talk about that in a second, but support that attacking core. And then in the middle, they have this really nice block of Adam Nagy and Schaffer, as well as the mercurial Laszlo Kleinheister, who I can't believe he only ever seems to turn up in international tournaments. I remember him playing against France in the last, and he dominated the French midfield that at that time had Kante, had Rabiot in it. He was the star of the show. And I was like, probably should keep an eye on this bloke. He's bounced around 4 clubs, had unsuccessful loan spells everywhere. He's one of those players that just seems to turn it on. The Sofian Amrabat of Hungary, if you will, turns it on at international tournaments. And this is a hard-working and very ball-hungry midfield core that allows their forward players and that creative hub to function. So the key player is obviously Dominik Szoboszlai. And I think he's had a very good first season in the Premier League without it being, top of the range exceptional. But when he plays for this Hungary side, so much of it goes through him. It is give him the ball and let the maestro create. And when they play through him, this team sings. They're such a brilliant unit to watch. And when you kind of have a player that has that creative freedom that Szoboszlai has, and I think you're kind of getting the Leipzig Szoboszlai as opposed to the Liverpool Szoboszlai, not that that's necessarily always a good thing, but in that everything goes through him. He is allowed to be the man that pulls the strings in that midfield. In a way, he's probably asked to do a little bit more defensively, a little bit more for the team in this Liverpool side. He's kind of got the keys to the castle here. And you kind of look at all of these things put together and you think, well, if Szoboszlai can turn up at this tournament and do this, then Hungary have the potential to really, bloody a few noses, I think. People are talking about them as dark horses for competition winners. I think that might be a stretch. But I think that this team has the capacity to be knocking on the door of the quarterfinals, semi-finals, because I am yet to see a side in qualifying who are as impressive, I think, as this Hungary unit. And then there's Milos Kerkez, right? The Bournemouth left back. He plays as a left wing back here. Brilliant for RZ. Had a little bit of a ropey start to his Bournemouth career, but has really grown into it, I think, this season under Iraola, who's been very, very impressive getting forward. He's given that license to join the attack and whip in dangerous balls. And I think that when you have him down one side and able to just dominate up and down the flank, he's got a great engine on him, and I really, really like his work rate on top of everything else. But he's got an eye for the creative, as to kind of add to that. I think this Hungary side are going to cause problems for people, and I'm quite happy talking about them as dark horses.
Yeah, backs up my prediction, which is Group A. First, Germany. Second, Hungary. Third, Switzerland. Fourth, Scotland.
Yeah, I think I'd love to be putting Scotland in third here, but I'm struggling to look past.
I mean, mate, if I was to mix it up a bit, the main change I'd make is Hungary first, Germany second.
Yeah, no. Honestly, that's kind of potentially where I'm at too. But I also think that could be quite an interesting one. But yeah, playing it safe. Well, let's move on to Group B. Who are you going to open us up with?
Spain, of course. Very excited about this young Spanish version that we are starting to get now. Obviously, Yamal, Pedri, Kubasi, Nico Williams, but there's even players in here that aren't especially young, like Dani Olmo is 26 now from RB Leipzig, who I think could have a really good competition. And I think that this is a big moment for Spain. We've got to be a bit careful not to, if things start going really well for them in this tournament, then I'm a little bit concerned that people start comparing them to great teams of the past, like 2008, 2010, 2012. But I think in the coach, Luis de la Fuente, they've got somebody who will remain very level-headed no matter how things go at any point. Let's not forget, he had to win over critics himself to get to where he is right now. And he's won most of them over, to be fair. But at the start, people really weren't sure that this was the guy to kind of get them back to where they once were, having been successful with the unders teams, but not coached in over 10 years. So it was a reasonably unpopular choice at the time, but I think that it's been proven to be a good choice. And I think that they've just got big ability to cause a stir at this competition. I mean, that obviously goes without saying because it's Spain and you always expect that from them. But I think that this side has a special spark because of the players that we've started to see emerge. Like Lamine Yamal, he's 16 years old. And like we talk about this all the time, but he plays like he's 21 already. And I think given that you've got, say, Rodri, for example, in the middle of the pitch, who is that kind of, he's a leader, but he's calm. But I said before a few times now, since I've watched that Man City documentary, what Rodri is giving you behind the scenes is priceless in terms of the mentality to go onto the scene and feel like you fit in, feel like you're a winner. Lamine Yamal needs that. Now, at Barcelona, he obviously has it to a certain degree, but he's not actually winning yet at Barcelona, and you want to level up from that. And I think in this Spanish group, there are players that are going to help him do that. And look, Morata, still extremely important. Yeah, he's 31 now. Yeah, look, some people don't love Morata. I personally do. But he's captain in this team. The rest of this Spanish squad hold him in such high acclaim, like genuinely like the top man of this team, Morata. He scores 1 in 2 for the Spanish national team. He's just a really good fit for what they are going to try to do because I think he's going to have a very simple task, mate. Stick the ball in the back of the net and don't go anywhere else. Like, stick between the posts, occasionally pull out wide so we can make some inroads. But generally, you've got Olmo one side, you've got Yamal the other side. At some point, you're going to have Nico Williams coming in to pull strings. You're going to have Rodri sliding in passes from time to time. I mean, there's so many players I'm obviously not mentioning here. I'm not going to reel off every member of the Spanish squad who's able to create chances because there's too many of them. But he's going to be served up so many chances, Morata, over the course of this group stage particularly. And personally, I trust him, right? If this team under De La Fuente want to use a 9, a proper 9, you've got him. And they're going away from the days of the false 9.
Osalu.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's actually going to be really important. So if I was to give my own key man, honestly, I'd probably still be saying Morata. Like, even after these times and these tournaments, and I've seen him fail before, but do you know what? I still trust him. But I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that they've got a little batch of players here that are breaking through and have a level of creativity that is just going to be so exciting to see come through. It's tough. What I find with Spain is that they've got Croatia, then Italy, then Albania, and Albania would typically be seen as the easiest game, and they've got to really tie up the qualifying before they even get to that match. I actually think that might be good for this team. I think to have to start off with a challenge like Croatia, who have kind of got this authority now in international football and everybody respects them. I think Spain need that to know that they're going to have to do their best to break them down. I think that will help them.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you think of Spain, and obviously it's very kind of basic level, but you talk about the midfield, right? Because there is going to be three players in here that are going to be fundamental to how Spain are going to operate. And I think that kind of when you look at all of these bits, you go, well, Rodri is, by my money, the best defensive midfielder in the world. And the two that go alongside him is going to be very interesting. Now, obviously, Gavi's missing. And I think a Rodri, Pedri, Gavi midfield three would have been heaps of fun. And I'm sad we're not going to see it in action at this tournament. But you'd imagine that the Pedri is going to play as long as he is fit. But the options for that third spot, they want to go a little bit more defensive. Zubimendi goes in there. They want a little bit of creativity and kind of those slide rule passes. Fabian Ruiz goes in there. Mikel Merino can go in there. Marcus Llorente can play about 52 different positions. So he's always worth having about. But on top of that, I think Alex Garcia, outside of Bellingham, has been the best midfielder in La Liga this season for Girona. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up with a start in one of these group games, because the ability that he has, but also that kind of ability to raise his game for the top level. The big games this season, he's been one of the players that's really stepped up for this Girona side. And then there's Alex Baena, who gives you that kind of more kind of 8-10 role and plays a little bit further forward, a bit of a box crasher. And Fermin, who again has been phenomenal for Barcelona. Now, all of these players might not make it. Obviously, it's a 29 preliminary squad at the moment. They might have to cut one midfielder. But when you're kind of looking at that, you're thinking, well, it almost doesn't matter. They could play any combination as long as Rodri's in there. And you'd back that Spain midfield to dominate almost anyone from a technical standpoint. I do think that in Morata and Joselu, they have this kind of sense that they can only play one type of number 9. I know that they're not the same player in that Morata likes to stretch the pitch a little bit more and get in behind. But also there's that kind of sense of, you know, they are probably going to be looking for crosses into the box. That hasn't always been a strength of where Spain are at. But the options to play around them and out wide, Dani Olmo, and you talk about Oyarzabal, who I love, Real Sociedad, Ferran, Nico Williams, who I think could end up being the breakout star of this tournament. A lot of people know about him. I still don't think he's kind of widely seen as one of the most exciting wingers in the world. I think that could change over the course of this tournament. And then, as you say, Lamine Yamal, I can't see Jose Perez, Betis as I am, getting into this squad at the end. And I'm not quite sure what he's doing there. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, even as a Betico, I was a bit shocked by that call. They maybe have a little bit of a weakness at centre-back, but the fact that they've been able to leave out Pau Torres suggests that they're pretty comfortable with where they're at in that kind of sense. Laporte, Lenormand, Nacho, Danny Vivian, who's had a phenomenal campaign for Athletic Club, Pau Kabasi. And then Grimaldo or Cucurella plays left back. I'd imagine it's Grimaldo. Carvajal or Jesus Navas plays right back. You'd imagine it's Carvajal. He's just started and won his 6th Champions League final. David Raya has kind of silenced the critics in goal. But then if not, then Unai Simon's had another great season. And Alex Ramiro is a brilliant goalkeeper at Real Sociedad as well. This isn't as heavy as a Real Madrid or Barcelona contingent as we've seen in Spain squads in the past. But considering the weight of expectation that's been around those squads, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So yeah, I think that we're heading into a tournament. You always want to put Germany as one of the favourites. You always want to put Spain as one of the favourites. I don't know again that this team's got quite what it takes to go and win the tournament, but there's definitely potential there if the early stages go well. Okay,
all right. Well, you mentioned Croatia. I'm going to come on to them next. Early thoughts on Croatia. Obviously, they know what they're doing, and most of this squad have been here before. There's less turnover in Croatia's squad from the last few tournaments than almost any other squad, which, considering how well they've performed, should stand them in good stead, right? That said, this does feel a little bit like maybe the afterglow of a golden generation who have overperformed, according to their manager, in the last few tournaments. Like Dalic is a funny old character, right? He carries his rosary beads with him. He's had an unassuming club managerial career before taking this job. He's repeatedly said he will leave if they don't qualify for a tournament, but considering they keep ticking and winning medals, there doesn't seem like much danger of that happening anytime soon. But last week, when he was asked about the expectations, he said, "We raised the bar too high. We won 3 medals in the past 5 years. Croatia have always showed that they're the best when it's the toughest. We will try not to disappoint." And it's interesting because considering how brilliant they've been at World Cups, the Euros have been a weirdly bad place for Croatia. Like, they've shone when it's come to the big stages of World Cups, but they haven't reached the quarterfinals of a European Championship since 2008. Well, that probably should be noted that they ran into an excellent Spain side in 2020 and eventual winners Portugal in 2016. But the midfield engine works out as the key player. I've done a couple here because I think, you know, you talk about Modric, you talk about Brozovic, you talk about Kovacic, and yes, okay, Rakitic isn't there anymore, but the experience and nous in those three and the ability to play off each other, to know exactly what the others are doing, to cover for each other in circumstances is the heartbeat of this side. And when you kind of experiment with, you know, we talked about Switzerland, right? And we talked about the fact that that spine know what to do, that they have that tournament nous, that they have that just kind of feel for how to get through these games in difficult circumstances when things get tough. It's hard to look at a squad more than Croatia's and think they've just got that. They know exactly what they're going to do. There are so few players that are new to this. You know, this is a squad that has been through it together and has stayed together for the most part. I mean, one to watch, someone who maybe could break into that midfield, but also I think will be deployed further up is Lovro Majer, who scored 2 goals in their win on Monday, was very impressive against North Macedonia. I don't know how much that game is going to be useful as a kind of indicator of how Croatia are going to play. Luka Modric was still in Madrid celebrating the Champions League win, so he didn't feature. But actually kind of Majer being able to step up and provide goals and assists and basic general productivity from a slightly more attacking role, I think is going to be very interesting in terms of what this Croatia side end up looking like. I am worried that we might just be one tournament too far. It does feel like a very old squad. And I am also a little bit concerned about where the goals are coming from because the forward line doesn't fill you with loads of confidence. Kramaric has had a good season for Hoffenheim. And look, I praised Max Bayer earlier on in the Germany segment. Kramaric has scored far more than him. I think he's got 15 and 30 for this Hoffenheim side, and they were very impressive. But Petkovic is still knocking around here. Ante Budimir is still knocking around here. They're quite one-dimensional in these kind of attacks. Pasalic, was he no longer plays in Serie A. And Ivan Perisic is back in the fold after phenomenal recovery, to be honest, from an ACL injury where he's played 7 times, I think, for Hajduk Split, his boyhood club, since returning to Croatia, but hasn't been able to complete 90 minutes in any of those games. I am a bit concerned about that. There is some fun to be watching in Luka Sucic, who is been excellent for RB Salzburg. And you know that, this production line continues to churn out serious talent. So he's a very, very interesting player in terms of how he'll fit. And Martin Baturina, who plays for Zagreb and has sort of exploded onto the scene, I think. And a lot of people are talking about him as the heir to Modric. In a slightly more creative, attacking, old school Modric sense than maybe the exactly what he does right now. But Baturina is definitely one who could make an impact. I'm just wary that whilst this Croatia side are wily and they're smart, this group with Italy and Spain might end up just blitzing them one tournament too far. I
mean, look, they often exceed expectations. That's one of their big strengths.
And they're best when their back's against the wall, right? But I'm struggling with it.
Like, it wouldn't totally surprise me if in the opening game they managed to surprise Spain. Like, I think Spain are a much better team. I think that they've got much better potential in the tournament if they can get through the groups. But then I think with Croatia, I could see them having that mentality that gets them out of the group. But then I really don't know what they would actually have to challenge the best. You always expect them to be able to compete, and they will always compete. But it's very hard to see. Like, this is probably the team least likely to produce a breakout star. Like, there doesn't seem to be something there where you're like, oh my God, I'd never heard of that 18-year-old before this tournament.
It will be Baturina if he gets minutes, but I'm just struggling to see where he gets minutes in this side right now.
Yeah, so I think that's fair. I'm going to move it on to Italy. And I have to say, I think they could be one of the big casualties of this tournament. I'm so stuck on what I think is coming from Italy. I'm going to start with the positive, right? The positive that makes me think I'm being silly here is the Inter influence on this team. Because obviously, if you're looking for a foundation for a team and thinking, okay, well, what have we got as a major strength of ours? What can we build upon? And you're like, okay, well, we've got Acerbi, we've got Bastoni, Darmian, Di Marco, Barella, as a group of players that have just come through a Serie A season with Inter and have the mindset, have the technical attributes to build a team around. And that can be half of our team. So I'm like, okay, from that perspective, I'm like, okay, that is a true strength. And I think that is something that a lot of teams in this competition won't have. As a result of that, I don't think they'll concede many goals. So I think that they'll be structurally quite good. What I'm concerned about is where on earth are this team going to score goals from? Like, you look at the qualifying stages, like most of their goals came in matches against Malta and North Macedonia at home.
Yeah.
Which counts for pretty much nothing, I'm afraid. And
hey, North Macedonia were at the last Euros. Give us a breather.
Unless they won it, I'm not interested. No, sorry, Italy went and done that. But this is the thing. You're looking at a team here who are the reigning champions. They have half a team of Serie A champions, yet they don't have proper elite goal threat. They don't.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because I think, 4 strikers have played under Spalletti. So we're talking about the fact that, Immobile is back in the squad but hasn't played for ages. I can't see him starting.
No.
I think it's Retegui or Scamacca that starts. For my money, as much as I like Matteo Retegui, and I think he's had a really, really good season at Genoa, it should be Scamacca, given that he finished the season like a man on fire, right? Yeah. He had such a good end to the season, and he brings so much to this team in terms of what he can do with holding up the ball and allowing others to get into play. You want Barella on the ball in the final third, right? You want someone that's going to bring Chiesa in, even if he finished the season badly. You want someone who's going to link that. And I think that Scamacca is that player. But Retegui has a great goal-scoring record since he made that international switch from Argentina to Italy. He's someone that the Italian public have really got behind quite early on. And I think it's quite intriguing to see how they go about this. But I'm with you in that I don't know where the balance is. I think Italy should be playing with 3 at the back. But recent games have suggested that they're not going to do that, because I think that allows you to get players like Cambiasso or Di Marco in particular, who I think is potentially maybe the star here, who could really, really impact this tournament. I think that's the best way of doing it. I think you get, one of Cambiasso or Di Lorenzo on the right-hand side, and you get Di Marco on that left, and you allow him to just run things like he does for Inter. If you're saying to me that the key strengths of this side come from the fact that there is such a heavy Inter core, and I agree with you, play like Inter.
Yeah, well, he's tried it.
Players into the unit and make it work. And I think that there is something in that. If you could get that to work in a kind of 3-5-2 system, you could play Scamacca with Chiesa or Retegui, or even Raspadori up there, to be perfectly honest with you. I know he hasn't played all that much for Napoli this year, but I wouldn't be against that as an option. You allow Jorginho and Barella and potentially Fratesi, who I do really, really like, to sit in that midfield and make it work. And then you kind of have a system that makes sense. If they are going to play with 4 at the back, I think Italy might struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I don't know who the right back. Say Di Lorenzo, for example, is your right wing back. I think
anyone but Bellanova.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know that that's the strength. But I agree with what you're saying. That the strength, if you want to embrace the Inter players, is that you go with the back three, and then you have Di Marco as an outlet, and you also have Barella in the middle, and it gives you more chance of unity. So here's my concern for Italy. I so often, when it comes to judging teams' chances or the lack of opportunity, come to the fixtures, and I'm like, what are the potential problems here? And my potential issue for Italy is that their first match is against Albania, who are going to be bang up for that game, and Italy won't have much rhythm about them. If Italy aren't at their best in that game and don't beat Albania, then play the second game against Spain and will lose to Spain, they're then going into a decider against Croatia.
You don't want that at all, do you? You just don't
want
any
not
game.
Want that. No. You do not want that. And that is what Croatia want. And what then ends up happening, not only do you risk not coming in the top two, you could risk finishing bottom of the group and not even qualifying as one of the best third teams. I can legitimately see a problem here for Italy, whereby they risk becoming bottom of this group.
Yeah, by not drawing the final game. No, I get it. And the way that the system works is a bit weird, right? You have
and it's because of this. Yeah.
So and also because they're in the second group that will play, they won't know yet what determines. If you're in Group F, you play those final round of fixtures. You can kind of see what's going on. You can see the picture opening up. Whereas Italy won't know that, and that's quite.
I don't think this really suits them. I don't think anything here really suits this Italy team and the stage that they're at. So yes, they're champions. Yes, they've got half a good squad. I just personally do not fancy them in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, look, Spalletti is a positive, but has he had enough time to make his mark on this side? Probably not. They, I think, are in transition, and I'm not quite sure where they're at. So I think it's reasonable to assume that Italy could struggle. I still think they'll go through. But I can foresee them running into problems. And let's talk about the final one for today, and the final team in this group, Albania. Out of nowhere, an incredible qualification campaign for this Albania side under the stewardship of former Arsenal and Barcelona wingback Silvinho. There you go. Here's your first port of random knowledge, who, like Zlatko Dalic at Croatia, had a pretty unassuming time managing at club level. He was sacked at Lyon after 20 games. And he sort of bounced around unsuccessfully until he took this job. And his assistant, Dean, is Pablo Zabaleta.
Oh, it is indeed. Wow, what a combo.
That's fun.
What a combo.
That'd be a hell of a wingback combination, wouldn't it?
There
you go. We're talking about wingbacks.
Combination.
Italy should just hire Silvinho and Zabaleta. That's sort that right out.
Blimey, are they planning to use wingbacks? Didn't think they were.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, Albania, so Silvinho took over Albania at the start of the Euro qualifying campaign, guided the team to first place in Group E, ahead of the Czech Republic, Poland, Moldova, and the Faroe Islands. All right, maybe not the strongest group in the world, admittedly, but still, I thought they were imposing in qualifying and marked their first ever topping of a group this. Their appearance at Euro 2016 was the first time the country had ever qualified for a major tournament. So this is all quite new. I've spent a fair bit of time watching Albania because my barber is Albanian. And so I wanted to have some big chats with him about how he felt the team were doing. And he's cautiously optimistic about their chances. And I think when the group was drawn, I had a chat with him and he was like, look, obviously it's an incredibly difficult group. No one expects us to qualify. Everyone sees us as the game they have to win to secure qualification. That might suit us. That might suit us in terms of what we can do and also the pressure piling on to opposition teams. And look, they're not heaps of fun, this team. Let's put it bluntly. They're based on a rugged, dogged defense that works incredibly hard to maintain solidity. That's the reason they've only conceded 4 times in the qualification campaign. They've got 2 good goalkeepers in Thomas Strakosha and Etche Berisha of Empoli. Has to be a decision made there because basically they've played 5 games each ahead of this point. So we're not quite sure who the Albanian number one is going to be for this tournament. But in front of him, look, Serie A fans will be familiar with a lot of this team. And that's what makes that game against Italy really interesting, right? A lot of this team ply their trade in Italy. There is, famously relatively good relations between the two countries. And it's somewhere where Albanian footballers have plied trades in for a long, long time. But Berat Jimsiti, who's just obviously captained Atalanta, in the absence of Martin de Roon, to Europa League glory, Lazio right back, and an old friend of this podcast, Elsad Hisai, and into midfielder Christian Aslani, who I think is the key player here. Now, Aslani hasn't really been given that much of a go at it at Inter, and that's partly because that midfield three of Mkhitaryan, Barella, and Çalhanoğlu have been so good together that it's very hard to dislodge them. But I like Aslani, and I think he's one of those ones that feels a good bet for the future to step into one of these roles and have learned and spent lots of time with Çalhanoğlu in particular. I think he's going to play the deepest role. You could argue the same, for Fratesi, who I think is a brilliant footballer and hasn't really featured for Inter because that midfield trio are first names on the team sheet kind of thing. Those things are interesting here when you come to this, because I think that Albania are obviously going to be under the cosh. That defensive midfielder role becomes really, really key if they're going to win the ball back high and be able to launch these attacks that have been very impressive. The counter-attacking flair that they've displayed in qualifying has been very good. And that's where I kind of get to on the one to watch, because I'm not sure who's going to play up top. Armando Broja's there, who's had a weird season. Obviously came to Fulham on loan, basically didn't play at all because Rodrigo Muniz turned into R9. Raymond I, who was at Watford for a while, but also came through at the academies of Barcelona, to name a few, but is having a good campaign himself in Turkey. And Ernest Mucci, who was at Legia Warszawa, and there will be some consternation here amongst Aston Villa fans listening to this, because he was the man that tore Villa a new one in that first game in the Conference League all the way back in September. He was the man that really did shred that Villa defence. He became a record buy for Besiktas in January. And since there, he's done okay, right? He's not set the world on fire, but it hasn't been a great Besiktas season by anyone's standards. So him going there and kind of taking that on, I think he's a player with a massively high ceiling and who does things that people don't predict. He's quite a kind of sparky player who allows things to happen. He's not necessarily an out-and-out goal-scoring number 9, but he does link play well. And also he has that ability to dribble and really kind of take players on. And it's a real big part of how this side's set up. My hunch is that Broja starts, but these players coming on can make differences. And I think that when you kind of look to how they're going to get at teams and attack them, whichever combination of these three play is going to be the main outball for this Albania side. And these are the lads who are going to give people bloody noses. I think Aslani is the key in terms of how he protects his defense. But in general, if they're going to cause an upset here, I guarantee you it would be one of these three that steps up to the mark.
Yeah, no, I quite like them, bizarrely. I don't know what it is, but I was watching a bit of YouTube yesterday going through some of the teams that I didn't know very well, and Albania was one of them that I dug into for like half hour, 40 minutes. And I came away from it thinking, this is probably part of the reason I'm sticking Italy on bottom of this group.
Wow, that's bold.
I fancy them to get something. Mate, yeah, I know. It's wild, isn't it? My Group B prediction is 1 Spain, 2 Croatia, 3 Albania, 4 Italy.
That is so bold. That's
so bold. So bold.
I think Albania might get something too, but I think they might get something against Croatia. That's where I'm at with this one. I think this is a tournament too far. Now, look, Croatia might prove me wrong. They prove everyone wrong so often. But I'm going to go Spain, Italy, Albania, Croatia. Okay.
Interesting. So that's a fun group, though. That'll be interesting.
It's a really fun group. It's a really competitive group. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Albanians in particular acquit themselves there, because there are players who can make differences. And I think this is a well-drilled side that know exactly how they're going to go about their business at this tournament. So, yeah, super interesting in Group B. And that brings to a close our first of these 3 podcasts, which are going to look at all of the groups in the Euros. So that's Group A and B covered. Tomorrow, we'll have an episode doing Group C and D. And then on Friday, we'll drop E and F. So they'll all be there for you with a lot of time ahead of the tournament to get stuck into them and make sure you're well equipped to talk about with your mates in the pub, really, and sound somewhat impressive in terms of what you
order your Euros fantasy team.
Yeah, Game out now. Euros fantasy team. This is exciting. I'm going to get involved, I think. Going to get involved. But for now, all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC with your first of the 3 Euros preview shows covering Groups A and B. Thank you so much for listening as ever. And we'll see you very shortly, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace. Final seconds of the game. A chance to score, and the chance has gone begging. If your business's commerce platform keeps missing the target on golden opportunities, get the MVP you deserve. Get Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool that you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed football boots from Shopify's in-person POS system, or you're vending vintage shirts on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. What I love about Shopify is how, no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/ranks.